So we are recording this. I want to welcome everybody. We're going to have people filing in, but I want to be mindful of our guest time today. We are speaking. I am thrilled to be doing this today. Really, we are lucky to have Phyl Terry, the author of Never Search Alone. I have my copy right here. And we're going to be talking today about sort of a new approach, the Job Search Council approach to looking for a job. The subhead here is the Job Seeker's Playbook. Phyl Terry, first, I want to welcome and thank you for being here today.
Sure. Great to be here, Chris.
So before we get to your book, I want to start with another book that you have people get, which is the manual. You can't really see it here. That's focused. Why? So for people who this takes 20 minutes to read. It's very short. But why do you have people start with sort of this text before they get into your book?
Yeah. Why don't you show it again, see if we can bring it in focus for people. There it is. Yeah. Kind of.
I'll put it by my face and
It's
see if there we
yeah,
go.
there it is. Perfect. So Chris, the most important insight. No, so just so your folks know, I've been an internet entrepreneur and a pioneer in product management and customer experience. I ran a consulting firm that was the first back in the 90s to kind of bring this out to the internet world, and worked with Apple and Facebook, Microsoft. We ran 400 projects, kind of created the template. Worked very closely with Marty Kagan. Your audience may or may not know the product world, I don't know. But anyway, did that for a long time. And then in 2002, while I was doing that, I started a program for senior executives in Silicon Valley, the Collaborative Gain Councils. And what we did there, and we still run that today 21 years later, is brought senior executives together from Amazon and Google and other places and put them in small councils where they would ask each other for help. And it's through helping those people in their careers that Never Search Alone developed. And over 25 years of helping a range of executives, and many of them in mid-career, which I know your audience is, the thing I learned, and this gets to why that book, the manual, is important. The most important thing I learned is that when you're thinking about making a change, right? Whether it's a job search to find another full-time job, or whether it's to build a portfolio of consulting and advising type roles, or you don't know, maybe you're not sure what you want to do. The most important and challenging thing is that everyone, no matter how smart, experienced, or great brand resumes they have, are nervous and anxious and insecure. And we have to address that. So the Never Search Alone methodology addresses it, but I first ask people to read that book, the manual, because it's a terrific summary of Stoicism. Now, I'm sure your audience knows about Stoicism. And by the way, I notice, Chris, that I can't send a message to the audience, just to hosts and panelists. Can the audience send messages so I can see them and possibly respond? Do we need to?
Yes. So if somebody has a question, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Go ahead and type that in, and then I'll get that and I'll relay it. So yes,
Okay.
Yes, we can have sort of an interaction.
Okay, but you don't have chat. You want to just do Q&A. That's fine. Okay, I can monitor that as well. So I'm sure your audience knows a little bit about Stoicism. The basic idea of Stoicism is that you don't control almost anything except your reactions to what's happening, right? And the three big ideas of Never Search Alone are really simple. One, never search alone. Instead, form a job search council. And that's important because when you sit with other job seekers and discover you're not alone, not just intellectually, but emotionally that you're not alone, it flips that anxiety and fear into hope and motivation. It's a great hack of human psychology, and we'll talk more about that. The second big idea is what I call candidate market fit. And you need to have a stoic appreciation to really understand candidate market fit, because the deal is that when you're looking for a job, you're in a marketplace where you don't control the dynamics of supply and demand. So you need to understand how the market sees you, where the market openings are, as well as what you want. You need to have a Venn diagram intersection of those three things. That's candidate market fit. And then the third big idea is to play to win, not to lose. Most people, when they're in a job search, they get defensive, they get scared. When they're interviewing, when they're talking and negotiating, they get scared and clamp down as opposed to more open. And that's really important, because one of the big ideas in Never Search Alone is when you are talking to a company about a potential job, I want you to get set up to succeed from the get-go. Not just good comp, but budget, resources, support, whatever you need to succeed in that role. And that's particularly important for midlife people, because there's an opportunity cost to every role you take, right? We don't have an infinite amount of time left in our career. Every job has got to count and really, give us the learning, the career advancement, and of course the compensation and achievement, sense of purpose that we want. So those are the three big ideas, and the reason I start with that book, the manual.
And I highly recommend, I know you say it, and it's included throughout, but it does take you like an hour to read. It's very short. And it's tough because I wanted to dog ear each page, because it is really sort of reaffirming. You're just like, oh yes, that you're right. It's ancient wisdom.
Gem on every page of that book. High signal to noise. It's a very short book, as you said. And I do this. I encourage people to read it several times, try to let it sink in. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to walk a line here today as we're talking, because I want to introduce people to the concept of job search councils and Never Search Alone, but not so much to where like we're just rehashing the book, right? So what I want to do is, you talked a little bit about how you had set up these job search councils before, but for people new to the concept, what is a job search council and why did you invent this?
Yeah. So it's a support group. Everyone in it is a job seeker. And we actually now have a whole volunteer community led by volunteers. It's free, where we'll set you up and match you with job seekers. You can also do it within your community, Chris. You don't have to have our team do it. But we've set up and run 2,400 of these, Chris, 2,400. So it's a mutual support group. Everyone's a job seeker, and they're more or less at the same level, meaning tenure in their career, right? But not necessarily the same role: product, marketing, operations, sales, whatever. The diversity can bring a lot of benefit. And that job support group, that job search council, you come together, and the key is to be open and vulnerable and ask for help. This is one of the things I really talk a lot about in the book. One of the key habits of every great leader is the ability to ask for help. But to ask for help, you need psychological safety. You need an environment of trust. And it's very hard to do it in many environments in business. A job search council creates that environment where you can be open with each other. And that's really the demand that I put on people. Really open up and be vulnerable. That's how it's going to be powerful. And then in terms of the methodology, like what do you do together? We have a whole set of agendas and tools and templates. But the most important thing you do together is figure out and go through a process to determine each of your candidate market fits. A combination, and you start with, what do you want? What do you want? This is a radical question, Chris, for most people. Most people just jump in and just start, being busy, spray and pray, as we call it, when they're looking for a job or they're thinking about, doing a portfolio thing. No, we're saying we got to slow down to go fast. Slow down initially. Think about what you want. And then you go out and do a listening tour. Basically, listen, when you're in a job search, and again, whether it's a full-time job or it's to build a portfolio thing or whatever it is, your skills and experience are the product that you're bringing to market, right? They're the product that you're bringing to market. So you have to understand that candidate market fit and how the market sees you. So the job search, but that's hard to do. People are always nervous. Oh gosh, I can't go out and talk to people. Like, what are they going to tell me? It's always actually very loving and powerful, but people feel anxious at first. So that job search council, it's a safe place for you to get support. It's a board of advisors for your job search, right? Where you can really be open. It's difficult to do that with your spouse. They're often in a different place than you are, and often it can create tension in the marriage, by the way. It can, you might have friends, but maybe they're not in business or whatever. You might have people you've worked with before, but you're not sure what you want to say to them and what, so it's a safe place. And it's one of the key aspects of this is the power of strangers. If you bring strangers together, peers, strangers who are peers, who are in that job search, you can be more open with them, and you can create actually more trust and support than often you can do otherwise in your life.
I think that's really key. You actually took my next question, which is just the importance of strangers and what you go into in the book, which is you don't have any sort of pre-existing baggage with anyone.
Right.
So you can really be more vulnerable.
Yeah. It's remarkable. It's a great hack of human psychology, Chris, and it's counterintuitive. But I can't tell, I mean, every day, I get tens of emails every day from people who've just started their job search council, and they're like, I can't believe it. We just had our first meeting. All these people I didn't know, and now we feel so close and connected. Like, wow, yeah, it works. And this goes back to my mom, Chris, and I talk about her in the book. My mom started the first council in 1960, 60, for elementary school teachers in the San Fernando Valley. She taught me this. She taught me about the power of asking for help. She taught me about the power of a council. She ran that group for 50 years, by the way, 50. Really remarkable, until the year before she died. And so, it was kind of a family business, if you will. So I started a council for internet CEOs with McKinsey back in the mid 90s when I was at the Harvard Business School as a student. And then I started these councils for Silicon Valley leaders in the early 2000s that I still run today. And then I started building job search councils because the need is so great. There is nothing out there for job seekers. They are alone, Chris, other than communities like you run, which is so powerful and helpful. It's the same concept, right? But it's brought to this very particular moment.
But I think, to your point, it is still it's just an emotionally fraught and lonely thing, because you're sitting at your computer, and the traditional method of doing things is, like you said, spray and pray. So you're just like, I'm going to apply to this, I'm going to apply to this, and I'm tweaking my cover letter and my resume, right? And you either get ghosted or rejected. And so it just becomes this, if you're alone, it just can be this oppressive blanket that just pushes down on you. And you just, so much is wrapped into it. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of the resources that you have, because I think it's really important for people to know that, after you get the book, you have a ton of resources for free. And I've changed the chat. If you want to drop in any links, I can put in the link as well.
Oh, okay, perfect.
You should be able to send it out to everybody. Phyl.org. Thank you. Phyl.org. Describe just for a little bit, so people get the book, Never Search Alone, right? And you have exercises and other things in there, but everything you ask people to do is on Phyl.org. Can you walk through some of the workbooks? Well, workbooks is too strong, but you know what I mean? Like the templates that you offer, because people don't just have to do it out of whole cloth. You're actually helping them, pulling them in.
This is so important. Again, look, there are things when I was doing strategy work, I wasn't always a big fan of templates because it could box your thinking in. But when it comes to the job search, and we're also emotionally fraught, having these tools and templates are such a great guide, and people have really loved that we provide this. So, sorry, I've got a little dry here.
That's all right. No problem.
So we literally have 25 key tools and templates. When you sign up to be matched on Phyl.org, which again is free, and people always say to me, is this really free? Like, there's some trick, right? No, the whole thing is free. And every dollar of the book sale, in fact, for every dollar of book sales, I put another dollar into running this community for free. Why do I do that? It's a way to give back, and it's a way to honor my mom. And I'm at a point in my career where I can do this, and it's just, it's just so meaningful. So if you sign up at Phyl.org, you get a live orientation by my talented volunteer team. By the way, more than 20,000 hours of volunteer work have been invested in this community already, Chris, and we're just beginning. We were on the BBC News yesterday worldwide, which was great. Lenny's podcast, which is a top 10 tech podcast in Silicon Valley, featured a 2-hour episode with me in September. We 5x the number of signups the day that happened. And in fact, that's continued. Lenny's has a huge audience in the product world. It's been amazing to watch. It's begun, we put this out 2 years ago, and it's just growing. So when you sign up, you're invited to an orientation program. You're given a 100-page workbook. Okay, this is free. Again, it's all free. They feel like, Oh, it's not right. Like, you're going to trick us, right? No, no, it's free, free, free.
Yeah, you're not going to wind up with some timeshare somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's no, what do we get only?
Yeah.
It's, this is part of, we're trying to create a private safety net for the unintended consequences of one of the most beneficial aspects of capitalism. At the heart of capitalism is something called creative destruction, Chris. It's an economic term you may have heard. The idea is that new products and services and companies and ways of working displace the old ways, right? And we see that all the time. We see that obviously with technology, with AI, et cetera. But it's been going on for a couple hundred years. It's why living standards in the United States have gone up 6x in the last 100 years, which is remarkable, absolutely remarkable. But because it's constantly replacing the old with new, that means there's instability in the heart of the system. And that means everyone's vulnerable to being laid off or let go or whatever and finding themselves in the job search. And we have not, as a society, figured out a way to deal with the emotional isolation and the problem that people don't know how to look for a job. We have unemployment insurance. We're never going to be able to obviously have the money to give people unemployment insurance. The government can do that, and that's great. What the government can't do is innovate how this works. And that's what we're attempting to do here. And we're still very early on. We've launched 2,400 councils. We've helped about 15,000 people. Those are great numbers, but there are 6 million people looking for a job in the United States today, right? So it's still a drop in the bucket. But our volunteer team is dedicated to doing this for the long term. It's really remarkable. And so we want to provide all of the, so to your point about the question, what do people get? The tools and templates, and we're constantly updating them, right? So we ask you to think about what you want, and we provide a tool called the Mnookin 2-pager that's named after Allison Mnookin, who was a longtime member of my collaborative councils, a senior executive at Intuit, and then a CEO, and now is a professor at Harvard Business School. It's a great tool. We provide that tool to you for free, and we have a bunch of examples of other people who've created their Mnookin 2-pagers where they think about what they want, what they don't want, what their strengths and weaknesses might be, that kind of thing. We provide tools for how to think about the listening tour, how to hone the candidate market fit, and we give you a lot of examples there. It's just, and we're constantly refining and creating those tools as we go. We want to create an amazing experience. We think this would have enormous positive social benefits if we created, if when people laid off, they felt like there was a community and a heart and a home for them, right? We're now going out to companies, Chris, and we're saying, guess what? We have a new outplacement program you can send people to, and it's free.
Yeah.
What?
It's really remarkable. And, it's funny because I went to the website and I printed off one of the things.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was like, oh, I'll go check on it. And it was still printing because it was like, oh, this is actually it's 30 pages of stuff. It's like, wow, there's a lot here. It was not like just a quick one-off kind of thing. Like, make sure you fill up on toner before you go download, because these, and I say that in like a completely appreciative way, which is these are substantial and substantive tools that you are giving people that you said, like you said, are free, right?
They're
you
free.
Just go and download them.
Most authors, business authors, if they have tools, it's like a one-page thing with 4 questions and cool designs on it. Like what? Oh, like what? They're doing that to get your email address, Yeah. We have this vibrant community of thousands of people and many volunteers who really want to create something here that's real. Yeah, and it's substantive.
Yeah, I put the link in for everybody to take a look at, Phyl.org, Phyl.org. And I want to remind people, if they have questions, they can submit them hitting the Q&A button at the bottom. Phyl is obviously wonderful and energetic, so you're going to get a really good answer. And a side note, real quick, I want to just take a moment to appreciate how you attribute credit to people. Between the Mnookin 2-pager, there's another thing that you attribute to people.
So dashboard, Joe.
Yes, that's the dashboard. Yes. So that's just the sign of a lot of integrity when you are giving credit where credit is due.
You know what's funny, Chris, about that, and I'd love your audience to hear this because we live in a world that's it's sort of the message is always you got what's your brand, me, and I'm not and those things are valuable. I'm not, but it's a funny thing if you give credit that's appropriate and due, people respect you more.
Yeah.
And it's exact opposite of what you think is going to happen. You're not going to lose respect. You're not going to lose credit. People everybody knows that nothing happens. Nobody creates anything by themselves.
Right.
Right. Even Steve Jobs, there's a terrific interview with Jobs, The Lost Interview. It's called The Lost Interview. Folks can Google it. It's really good. It's from like 1995 or something like that. He was in the real downstage of his career at that point. And he says in that thing, he says, look, people like to say this is me because they want the shorthand, but building the original Mac, it was an amazing team of people, and he named some folks, right? We live in a world where that's sort of shorthand. Who's the CEO? Let's name that person, right? But this all happens. Like my book itself, by the way. So I did 300 interviews. I spoke to 300 people. I coached 2,000 job seekers. That is what went into developing the methodology. And then once I drafted the book, I had about 300 job seekers read it, try to use it, and give me feedback. I had 2,500 comments, and I went through 400 drafts, Chris. 400 drafts. So when people read the book and they say, oh, how did you know I was thinking that when I got to page 33? I said, because someone told me that they were confused, or they were like, oh, you said this, but what about that? So I addressed it, there's no mystery here.
So I want to get in tactically, just so you go to Phyl.org, you sign up for a job search council, you get placed, right? You don't have to do anything. You just say, this is, you fill out some questions, and then you say, so I want to just cover a couple of things, right? Which is the idea that slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? Right. So you have the listening tour and the market candidate fit, right?
Yeah,
so can you go over those things
let's
just so
get
people
real
understand?
practical.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what the experience is like. So you go over to Phyl.org, you sign up, and it'll take our team anywhere from a day or two to a week or so to get you matched. You will then be invited to an orientation program, live orientation by a senior leader in my community. It's terrific. You will be, and your moderator, if you're not the moderator of your job search council, will set up meeting zero. We call it meeting zero. That's the chance to just talk and get to know each other, be open and vulnerable, and we have a thing around that. Once you've done meeting zero, and you schedule your meetings, and you'll walk through a process where you first start working on your Manukan 2-pager about what you like, don't like, what you want, don't want, what your strengths and what your career goals. And it's a draft because some people don't know exactly what it is they want, and that's part of the point. And you work on that with your counsel, and you share it with each other, and you learn from each other. It's really fun. And then once you have a draft of that, you go out and do a listening tour. You do 15 conversations, right, with people you've worked with in the past. I call those reverse exit interviews, and they're detailed in the book. With people in your broader network, I call those golden question interviews, and I tell you how to do that. And with recruiters. But you're not asking the recruiter for a job. You're asking them for their advice on your candidate market fit. And that's what all of this is driving to. We're trying to see, how does the world see you? What are their opportunities given your skills and experience at this moment in the market? And so one of the challenges, Chris, and this is really, look, when you're in your 40s and 50s, let's say you're let go at that point. We had in the BBC, folks can listen to the BBC News episode. It's on Phyl.org/press. It went out yesterday. They interviewed one of our job seekers who's been looking for 2 years, right? They're 50 years old, okay? And it's a tough market in tech. They come out of tech, in product development in tech. And what I said to this person recently is like, have you gone back out to figure out your candidate market fit? Because the market keeps changing. And so what you figured out 18 months ago is not the same as today. Like, you have to continuously address this. And one of the things that I find, Chris, is that people who are our age, okay, who are in the middle age,
Yeah.
the job search is extra hard, okay? And people face ageism. And frankly, if you've never faced any kind of discrimination before in your life, and ageism is the first thing you've hit, it can be really kind of a little bit jarring. And many people just stop. They get demoralized and stop. And what I say to the long-term lookers in our communities, you have to do everything. You have to keep revisiting your candidate market fit. You have to network. And this is what the Job Search Council is there for, to support you doing that. Because guess what? Nobody likes networking. You know, almost nobody. Maybe there's somebody.
Karen Wickery.
Yeah. We have a great book. I give
Yes.
Karen Wickery a lot of credit in our book. I ask people to read her book, Taking the Work Out of Networking. And we have her come speak a lot. She's been terrific.
Yeah.
So you got to network. You got to revisit your candidate market fit. And the market keeps changing. And that means what you want may not be possible today. That's especially true right now in the tech world, Chris. There's a real downturn in tech jobs.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. If you listen to the BBC News from yesterday, the assistant secretary of labor comes on after we talk, because we're talking about, hey, there's a downturn in tech. And they say something like, well, I don't know about any particular industry, which is funny because their department actually puts out the data that shows there's a downturn in tech. They're being a politician, right? But it's a little crazy making when you see these jobs reports come out, Chris, that say, oh, we've added a lot of jobs. The recent report last Friday, 245,000 jobs, amazing, and the unemployment rate went down. Well, guess what? Those jobs were not in tech. They were in healthcare and education and in government. Tech, no new jobs were added. Okay, we're still below. We're significantly about 20% below where we were a couple of years ago, Chris. It is really tough. So you have to do everything. Now, if you're not in tech, you're in a different industry, that's great. You still have to do, everything. I want you to do everything. I want you to find a good job. It's possible to find a good job even in a tough market, but it takes work, and you need that support group to keep going and keep motivated.
Can we dive in a little bit more on the candidate market fit? Because I think that's really important for people, because again, it's not spray and pray, right? Like you're figuring this particular element out. Can you expound a little bit on that?
Yeah, so let me just address the time duration issue for a moment, because that's everybody, saying, oh, how can I take the time to do this? So the average job search in the United States, according to the Department of Labor, goes from 3 to 6 months. The average duration of a job search in the Never Search Alone community is at the very low end of that. It's just over 3 months. So the good news is this really is a go slow to go fast approach. But in the beginning, I'm asking you, don't stop spraying and praying for a minute. Think about what you want, and then go out and do a listening tour to understand where you fit in this market today. And I give this great example in the book. I actually have more than 100 stories, but just to name one, a couple years ago, I was talking to a woman who was an adjunct professor at Hunter College, poetry, right? This is not a great profession, right? There's not a lot of jobs for poets. And she and her wife had a divorce, and she needed to find a way to make more money. So I told her, listen, you got to figure out your candidate market fit, and it's not poetry, professor, because there's just no jobs there. So she went out and did a bunch of, she's a great writer. She's a great teacher of writing and editing. And after she did her listening tour, Chris, a couple of people, and she said, told her, you should look into long form copywriting. Companies hire people like you to write their annual reports, write white papers. She had no idea this existed. By the way, I didn't either. We didn't even know that niche was out there. It turns out she was a perfect fit. She had the amazing candidate market fit for that. And so she went down that road. She would never have known that, Chris, if she had just sprayed and prayed. You have to do some work here. You're the product, your skills and experience. So just like if you're in a company, you have to think about your customers and the product market fit. Well, you're the product, and the customer are the companies that are going to hire your services, if you will, as a full-time employee or as a contractor, whatever it might be. And so you got to take that time. I'm not saying a lot of time. We're talking 2 or 3 weeks here. We're not talking months and months and months. And again, I tell another story in the book, a woman who had a very senior role at a chief data officer at a company, at a Fortune 500 company. She wanted to leave that. She had an engineering background. She wanted to go back and become a CTO. She spun her wheels for a year just spraying and praying. Then I said, slow down, do this. She went and figured out her candidate market fit. Turns out that she was not a fit for traditional. A recruiter told her this. It was a great session, great listening to her session. Not a fit for a typical CTO job, but there's a new CTO role that some companies are creating that is deeply focused on data. And for that, you're an amazing fit. Once she understood that, Chris, she had 3 offers in 3 weeks. Okay. Wow. So that's what we're talking about. Slow down, think a little bit, talk to your network, get support from your job search council, think about what you want, and see where your niche is, what your candidate market fit looks like today in this market, given the world that is today. And once you figure it out, it's like bang, the light bulbs go off. We did a session recently. We have a LinkedIn Live every 2 weeks where we bring, 500 or 600 people together. And we did one recently with the internal recruiter for a company and a job seeker from Never Search Alone who got hired by that person. And the story was basically, once that recruiter saw that person's profile, which had been optimized to their candidate market fit, he knew in a moment she was exactly the right fit for them. And they did a set of interviews, bang, bang, bang. But he said the thing that really made the difference was that she had done the work to think about her candidate market fit. Recruiters love this because they complain all the time. People say to them, well, I can do anything. No one can do anything with that. No one can do anything. No one can do any. You have to be narrow. And this is one of the key points is we humans can be expansive, meaning give me something really narrow and I can think of adjacencies that might connect for you. But give me something really broad, I'll never think of. I can't be reductive. I can be expansive, but not reductive. That's how recruiters work and hiring managers and your whole network. So we work hard with people and it's very counterintuitive. We want you, to tell us like, I'm looking for this is what her, Dee Dee's fit was, regional bank, looking for a CTO with a data science background, right? Super specific, right? But once she had that, bam, 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 bam. Right. We always say this, you catch a job with a spear and not a net. With a net, it flows through. With a spear, you can really be precise and get some opportunities. It's counterintuitive though.
I want to encourage people to ask questions. This is a really unique experience. I want to be mindful of Phil's time. So if you have questions, please hit the Q&A button below. I want to go from the big, speaking of expansive, to the specific. Yeah. I want to talk real quick, ask you about like the concept of the boomerang job, right? Yeah. And specifically, you had a really great tip about looking at someone's annual report. And I think it was section 7 of that report to make sure that if you're joining a company, you're not going to miss out on some red flags that might pop up.
So, one of the things that happens when people get laid off is they try to find a job, understandably, they need to put food on the table, whatever. And they feel like the best way to do that is just take whatever they can. It ends up being a boomerang job. It ends up being typically worse than the job they just left. And so I give I share some tips for how to analyze and think about companies. One of the interesting pieces of research is that if the annual report is full of photos of the CEO, it generally is not a great idea. There's some narcissism probably at work there. And section 7 of the annual report is important for everyone to learn how to read. Of course, if you have a private company, this doesn't apply. This applies to public companies with public documents. Section 7 is the management discussion and analysis section. And that will tell you a lot about the business, but the tone of it will tell you a lot about the culture. There's always cues to culture, Chris. And the thing that I find is that most people, see, what happens is when we start interviewing, we fall in love with the company. We want to be wanted. And if they want us, we put our blinders up and we ignore all of the red flags that we need to take into account. Now, just because there's a red flag doesn't mean you don't take the job. And again, if you need to put food on the table, then you've got to make that decision. But I want you to at least be eyes wide open about what you're getting into. And I find that people often willfully ignore these things. So I try to give some tips on how to, sort of decode the culture. And section 7 is one of those.
Yeah, I think again that's a very minute thing. The book is filled with lots of big ideas and very,
Yeah,
other things. But I
practical.
thought that was really interesting because you talk about just the boomerang job, which is you landed the job and then
Yeah.
you're out 18 months later and you got to do the whole thing again. So
It's
really,
really, and that's really hard on people. If you have to do it more than once within a year or two, it can really erode your self-confidence, and undermine your ability to get that next job. So
we I think are at time here. Phyl, this has really been wonderful and powerful and all the things that a job search counsel can be.
yeah,
Just for people just to follow up, I know we've put in the chat, but just what's the next steps for people watching right now?
Phyl.org, baby, Phyl. You know, come join a job search council. Download the free tools if you want to get the book. Obviously, whatever you might do, but just don't do this alone. Really. And if you're a part of this community, which you are because you're watching this, take advantage of what Chris is offering to you here. Ask for help. Reach out to people in this community. Like do all the things, okay? And definitely do not be alone.
All right. Phyl Terry is not only the author of Never Search Alone, the Job Seeker Playbook, but a wonderful person I have learned just now, and also head up at the Job Search Council movement. Please go to Phyl.org, Phyl. And we thank you so much for your time today, Phyl.
Chris, wonderful to be here. Thank you for inviting me.